what I want to do today is to show you how Power BI works. So familiarize yourself with Power BI. How do we connect to data? How do we transform our data to build our analysis? How do we create calculated columns and measures in Power BI? And we'll be diving into creating some visualizations, such as line charts, column charts, a single value card, a map visual, and a date slicer. After we're done creating these visuals, we will go ahead and publish to the Power BI service. And then we're going to look at, just briefly, how do we share this with our colleagues internally, and how do we share this online so that the whole world can see, for example, the focal project that I just showed you. We shared that online so that anybody that comes to the website, they can see that data. So the best way to do this is to have a demo. So let's just go ahead and I'll pull up Power BI. So when we open Power BI, this is the first screen that we'll get. And Power BI is going to prompt us here to get some data or connect to some recent data sources that we've used. But what I really like to do is to start fresh. So I'll just close this off. And now we're looking at the Power BI canvas. It's quite blank right now because we don't have any data, but we could import data from Excel, from SQL, from a variety of different data sources. I think the last time I checked, there were about 79 data connectors in Power BI, including things like Salesforce and QuickBooks, if you want to bring in your accounting data. So all of that is a possibility within Power BI. The really cool thing about Power BI as well, that you'll notice right here, is the familiarity of a Microsoft product. We're all familiar with Word and PowerPoint, Excel, and Power BI just gives you that ribbon feel. So everybody's already familiar with the ribbon here and different things, different navigation. So it really is easy to get started with Power BI just from that familiarity with Microsoft products. So when we get started here, there's several options to get our data. We can expand this to see all of the data sources from here to get our data. And Power BI is just thinking there. So as I mentioned, there's quite a lot of options from SQL, Oracle databases, Access databases, SharePoint, lots of stuff for you to explore here. We can also connect to Excel data sets, other Power BI data sets that we've already published, SQL Server, and we can even enter our own data into Power BI straight from the Power BI app. A couple other things that I wanted to mention before we get started with our data is the panes that we see here. So we have our fields pane, which is empty right now because we haven't loaded any data. Once we do, our data will show up here. We have our visualizations pane, which features some of the built-in visualizations and as well as some formatting options for the page and for each individual visual, and the filters. So once we want to add filters to this page or to this whole report or to an individual visual, we can do that from here. Right now, we're looking at the report view, which shows us the canvas. We also have a data view. So once we have data, this will be populated, and it's a good way to just have a snapshot of your data in here. And the model view, which shows you how each of the tables in your model are connected. So right now we don't have any data, so we don't see anything in here. So let's just go ahead and get started and pull in some data. So we're going to go ahead and choose Get Data here. We'll pull this down, and the data that we're using today is a CSV file. So we'll choose Text CSV, and we'll go ahead and go to our folder where we have our data. And the first piece of data that we're going to bring in is our sales table. So this is our sales data for this fictitious toys retail. Once we pull in a CSV, Power BI in the background is going to determine how this data is separated. It's the delimiter, it's automatically does that in the background, so you don't need to tell it that it's a comma separated file. It already does that for you. You can see a preview of the data here to see whether this is the data that you want or not. And you can go ahead and load that data straight into the model. But what I like to do first is to transform the data, because usually our data doesn't come perfectly clean. So we need to do some transformation to the data first. So when I click Transform Data, Power BI opens a different window here, and this is called the Power Query Editor. And this is where you do all of your data transformations. So what you can see here is your queries on the left side, so any tables that you bring in. And on the right pane, you see the current table that you're working with, and it gives you the applied steps. So everything that you've done to this table will get recorded right here, and you can navigate through the different steps. So what we're going to do here is when we're building these data sets and dashboards, readability is super important. We need our users to really understand what the data is that they're looking at. So we want to make this readable. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to capitalize our sales table. So just double click that, replace it, hit enter. Now our table is capitalized. So anybody that's using this table now will see it as it shows up right here. Secondly, our columns, they have this underscore here, which in my opinion, it's a little bit unprofessional. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. So you can do that in a couple different ways. You can double click and then just type in the name that you want for each column. You can also right click and get all of these options, including to rename this column. So we're going to go ahead and remove the underscore from each of the columns here. And we're good. Next thing we want to do is to look at the data types to make sure that Power BI has understood which data it is looking at. Sometimes Power BI doesn't get this right. For example, dates, sometimes Power BI thinks it's a text when it should be a date. And you can see it right here on the left corner, the data type. And for our case here, everything loaded up okay. But let's say it didn't. If our date here was, for some reason, it said a text date type, we can just actually click that little icon and change our data type. So we would then change it to a date type. But since Power BI has recognized everything correctly, we don't need to worry about that. And that's everything that we need to do to our sales table. So we're going to go ahead and bring in our other tables. And I can do that straight from the Power Query Editor. I do not need to apply these steps first and then bring our data. So I can just expand this. And again, I'll choose a text CSV data type. Power BI is going to know which directory I'm in now because I've already set that up. And now we're going to bring in our products. So the products table shows information about each of our products, cost, product price, and name and category. So we have all of that here. Power BI again gives us that preview. Now this time, Power BI doesn't give you the option to load the data because now we're importing this data from the Power Query Editor. So Power BI automatically assumes that we want to transform this data in here. So we just hit OK. And our data gets loaded. Again, I'm going to capitalize our products table. And you could also do that from here by right-clicking and rename the table. And again, I'm going to remove these underscores from the column names to make it readable for the end user. Sometimes from your database, you'll get data that isn't necessarily very intuitive for the user that's going to be consuming this report. So you can rename it to whatever you want. So, okay, we've renamed our columns here. The next thing is to check our data types. Our product ID is a number, so that's good. Our product name and category are text, so that's good. And then our cost and price, our currency. So all of that loaded up correctly. And so that's everything that we need to do with this table. Now the final table that will load, then again, we'll choose CSV file for our stores table. So we'll bring in our stores. And this data set contains information about our store names, cities, location, and open date. So we're gonna go ahead and load that in. Again, I'm going to capitalize the table name and remove the underscore from the name. All right, that's everything that we need to do. Our data types are good. We have text for where it should be text, number where it should be number, and a date data type where it should be a date. Now with the cities here, let's just say, I have knowledge of this database, so I already know something is wrong with this store city column, and that is one of our cities, there's a typo. So how do we fix that? There's quite easy way to do that. Right here under transform for our column, we can choose replace values. And that'll just give us this little pop-up. And I know that Ciudad de Mexico was misspelled as CUI instead of CIU. So we'll go ahead and choose the value to replace. So this is the misspelled value. And we'll type in the correct value. And this is important because we're going to create a map visual, and the map visual is going to take the store city name to populate. So after we've done that, we can just hit OK. And what you'll notice here is that our step is recorded. And all of this is in order, by the way. In order that the data came in, we made the headers, the first row, the headers, we renamed some columns, and we can actually go back to each step and we can see the code right in here if we ever wanted to get a little bit more advanced. It's beyond the scope of today, but you can get a little bit more advanced in here. And you can also delete each step. So let's say I did this, I made a mistake. I can click this little X and it'll delete that step from our data transformation. Or I can click this little gear icon to fix any mistake. Let's say I managed to make a typo here. I can actually edit that again. So that's everything that we need to do for our data setup. And so now what we can do is we have a couple options here. We can close and apply all of these changes. We can just apply and then keep working. So this apply and keep working means that the data is going to get loaded into the model, but we're going to keep working. Maybe we'll add some more queries, or we can close without applying anything. So that would mean we're not happy with this. Let's just close this. But I'm going to close and apply because I want to close the Power Query editor and I want to load my data into my data model. So Power BI is going to load the data model and load the files in here. This should be fairly quickly because our data set here is not super large. This can take several minutes if, for example, you're working with millions of records. Okay, so Power BI loaded all of that in correctly. We didn't get any errors. And what we see here now is in our fields pane, we have our products, our sales, and our stores tables. And if we click the little arrow here, we can see all of the columns that we just loaded up. They're in here named as we wanted them to be named. So all of that looks good. And we're ready to create some visualizations. But before we do that, I want to go back to the data model view just to show you what that looks like now. Now that we have our table set up in here, we have we can click this here to get a view like to make it fit into our view here, and we can move these tables around. Perfect. So what we see here is our three tables and how they are connected to each other. So this little arrow here shows how the data is connected. And Power BI does this automatically for us once we load our data. But we need to be careful here because it does it based on the column names. So if, for example, our store ID in here was renamed something like store_ID, and in here it's store space ID, Power BI might not get that correct. So we do need to come in here and double check that everything loaded up correctly. So we do see that there's a relationship from the products table into the sales table and from the stores table into the sales table. If we double click this little arrow, we'll get some more information on this relationship between these two tables. So we see the column that it is using to create that relationship between the two tables, as well as the cardinality here, which is a little bit more advanced, but I'll just briefly explain that the cardinality means that if it's a star to one, it means a many to one relationship. That means that we have multiple of the same store ID in our sales table, but only one unique ID, store ID, into our stores table, which is important. And the cross-filtering direction means how do we filter each table based on these values. So a single cross-filter means, and you can see the left arrow here, the arrow going from the stores table to the sales table. So this is a single direction arrow, and it means that we can filter our sales data by our stores data, but not the other way around. So we can't filter stores based on sales data. And this is the setting that we want, but we could, of course, change this to both. And if I do that and click OK, you'll see now I get a double-sided arrow. So now that means that I can filter our sales data based on the stores, and I can also filter the stores based on the sales. But for our purposes, we'll keep it as a single direction so that we just want to know our sales based on our stores. We don't want to know anything about our stores based on our sales. And we'll have a quick look at our data view. So our data view can give us a snapshot here if you're interested to take a look at your data. And we'll go back to the model view just for a second here and expand our fields. And one thing that you can do from here is these ID type of columns. They're not really ever used in creating visuals, so we can actually hide them. So they're in here for the purpose of joining our tables, but we don't actually need to actually visualize this data. So we're gonna click the little I here for all of the ID, so we hide that information from our visuals. All right, great. So now we'll go back to the report view and we're ready to create some visualizations. The first thing that I like to do before starting with any of the visuals in here is to bring in a background into my report. You can do that from the little paint roller here. If you haven't selected any visuals, then this will give you formatting for your page. And in here, you can do things like you're renaming your page. So if you don't want your page to be named page 1, you can call it dashboard, so that your users at the end will see dashboard instead of seeing page 1. You can change the page size from different aspect ratios. You can change it to a letter. So if you wanted an actual report like 8.5 by 11, you can choose that setting. Or you can choose custom and choose your width and your height as you see fit. For our purposes here, we're going to keep the 16 by 9, which is basically like a PowerPoint slide. And we'll head over to our page background. And from our page background, we can add an image. So we'll go ahead and do that. And from our model here, we have two images. One is our logo, one is our report background that I've already created, and you should have got that in the email. So we'll select our report background, and nothing happened. So why did nothing happen? Well, that's because we have a transparency here at 100%. So that means that our background color of white is at 100%. If we change it to 0, now we get to see the background that we just added. So we want it to be transparent to see our background. But this is not exactly how I wanted it to look like, and that's because of the image fit. The normal view is to just stretch everything out, but I wanted my image to actually fit in here. So I'll choose fit, and that's more like it. That's what I wanted. Perfect. The second thing that I want to do before getting to the visuals is to bring in my logo. So how do I bring in an image? I go to the Insert tab, and in here you can insert visuals, you can insert shapes, buttons, and image. And I'll select our logo, and Power BI is going to load that in. I can just use the corners to resize it. So I want it to fit nice and perfect right there. Great, so we got our Maven Toys logo. Next, we're going to add a report title, and that is also done in the Insert tab. And we'll just bring a text box, and we'll call this Maven Toys Sales Analytics Dashboard. And if we double click all of this, we can format our fonts here. We can format the size of our font, as well as color, make it bold. There's lots of options in terms of our text boxes here. So we'll go ahead and stretch that out and put it right beside our logo. But I don't actually want this white background because it's not looking so nice with my background, my report background. So I'll select this visual, and as you see here, our background is toggled on. So we want to toggle that off, and now we don't have a background for our text box. Perfect. Wow, that's looking nice already. So now we're ready to create our measures that we're going to be using in our report. So right before we can create our visuals, we'll need to create some measures and some calculated columns. So we'll go ahead and do that in here. So if we expand our sales table, we can select our sales table, and you'll see our table tools here got selected, and in here we can add a new column, or we can add a new measure. So the first thing we're going to do is add a new measure, and that's going to pop up here in the coding box here for our formula. And the first measure we're going to do is our units sold. So we'll type that in exactly as we want the user to see, because readability is super important. And that's just going to be a sum. So for us that are familiar with Excel, it's the same formula in DAX as it is in Excel. And we'll just sum our units from our sales table. And we'll close bracket, and we can either hit enter or hit this little check mark here. So we've created our units sold. The next thing we're going to do is to create a sales column, and you can do that from just by right-clicking here as well, and clicking. This time, instead of measure, we're going to create a new column. And the difference here is that we want our sales to evaluate over each row of our data. We'll call it the sales. And in the PowerPoint that I sent to you, you should have the formulas in there. If you wanted to just copy and paste, that's fine as well. So our sales is going to use the related function, which is basically I'd like to say it's similar to the vertical lookup formula in Excel for the Excel buffs in here. It's basically looking up the price in our products table. And then we multiply that by the units sold. Okay, and we'll hit enter. So that gets calculated in here. We'll create another column. And this time we're going to create our costs for each of our product. So costs, again, this is the same formulas, except instead of the product price, we're going to use the product cost. And by the way, if you see that once I start typing in, Power BI automatically tries to find that column and that table for us. And if I just hit tab, it automatically fills it in for me. And this will be times units as well. And this is times the units column, not times our measure of units sold. So making a distinction there. We'll hit enter. And now we have our costs column and our sales column. So from these now, we can create our total sales, which will be a measure. So we'll right click and hit measure. And our total sales is going to be just the sum of our sales. So our sales table and our sales column that we just created. Close bracket, hit enter. There's our measure. Great. Right click, a couple more measures. The next one is going to be our total costs. Total costs. And this is, again, just the sum of our costs and our sales costs. Yeah. So now that we have our total sales and our total costs, we can create a profit. So right click again, new measure, and we'll call this gross profit. And the gross profit is just our sales minus our costs. And because our total sales and our total costs are measures, we can open a square bracket and we'll see all of our measures pop up. So we can actually go and select total sales, hit tab, and then minus square bracket again, total costs, and this is our gross profit. Perfect. Now the final measure that we're going to do is a profit margin. So we'll create a new measure and we'll call this percent gross profit. We'll specify margin so that it's even clearer to the end user. And the reason why I'm using percent there at the beginning is because I find that it makes it easier to understand that this unit type is a percentage versus our gross profit, which is a currency. So to calculate our gross profit, we'll use the divide function. And you could use the backslash as well. So you could do your gross profit and then backslash forward slash total sales, but I'll use the divide function because it's better at handling zero values. So we'll divide our gross profit and comma, and we'll divide that by our sales. That gives us our profit margin. And now that we've created all of our measures, there's one last thing before we create our visuals, and that is setting up the correct formatting for our data types. So for example, our gross profit margin, we know that that's a percent value. Right now, what you'll see here under the measure tools, since we've selected this value, so if I was in a different one, it would be looking at that value. But since we're in our gross profit margin here, it automatically brings up the name, the table that it's housed in, and then the formatting. And right now, Power BI just made it a general formatting. That means it's not going to have the percentage sign on it, but we can just click percentage, and now it's going to have the percentage sign, and it will have 2 decimal places. Again, we can change this to 0 or 4, whatever we need it to be. We see that our costs automatically got selected as currency, so that's fine. If we look at our total costs, our total sales, it's all currency, so that's the units that we want. So we're good there. So how are we doing? That was a lot, I know. It's a lot of setup. Usually, I'd say any data analysis project in Power BI, I would say almost half of the time is spent cleaning the data and getting the data ready, and then the other half is creating the visuals. So now we're ready to create our visuals. The first visual that we're going to start with is a card, a single value card visual, and we can select that from here. Power BI is going to throw an empty visual in there, and we can bring in our measure. So the first thing that we'll do is our total sales. So we can just actually drag that and drop that right into the fields right here, or we could actually just drop it into the visual, and Power BI is going to handle that for us. Because I want this to be a smaller visual over here, because I want to add 4 of them in here, I will go into the formatting, so under the little paint roller, and we'll uncover here data label. And before I get into that, I just want to tell you that there is a lot of options here. There's not enough time for us to cover all of it, and you can discover all of the formatting options here. But there's a lot that you can do with any of the visuals in here in terms of formatting. But what we're going to do here is for our data label, we'll change the color. Maybe we'll make it blue, and we'll change the value of decimal places. Right now, you see how it's cut off. It doesn't look very good. So we'll change the decimal places to 0. Now we get that nice visual fitting in to our whole card visual instead of it being cut off. But this to me doesn't look that nice because it's blending in with my white background. So what I'm gonna do then as well is I'll add a shadow. So you have the option to drop a shadow here, and that to me looks nicer. You get a nice like 3D effect in here. So that's looking nice. We'll grab this one, and we're going to create 4 of these. So I'm gonna copy this visual by using the Control-C or Command-C on the Mac, and then Control-V to paste it. So now I have that visual, and what you see is that Power BI, just like other Microsoft products, helps you align things by using those little dotted red lines. So I want things to align to make it visually appealing for my end user. And so that's just a straight copy of this. And what I can do now is I'll delete my total sales. And what I want here is my total costs. Great. So it's as easy as that. I'll paste another one of these visuals, and I'll align it with the other ones. I'm trying to keep the same space between them to make it look nicer. And my next measure is going to be my gross profit. So I'll bring that in. And I don't actually have to delete this, by the way. I can actually just grab the gross profit and put it right over top. And we'll see that it did get calculated right, since our total sales minus our total costs is 4 million. And now we'll add the last card visual. And this one is going to be our gross profit margin. I'll just bring that in here. Great. So that's looking nice. The next visual that we're going to be creating is going to be our map visual. So there's a few map visuals. There's a filled map, there's a shape map, but the one that we're going to be using is just a standard map. and I'll bring it over here. I'll resize it the size that I want. And you can do this either before or after you add your data in there. So okay, that's how big I want this to be. Now we have to fill in our data. Of course, for a map, we need a location data. And we know that from our stores data, we have that information. So we'll go ahead and bring in our store city into the location. And now we get a map, which is nice. But all of the dots on the map are all the same size. They're not really showing me anything other than there's a city there. So I want to bring something in for the size of the bubbles. And what I want for the size of these bubbles is our total sales. So I could have bring in any of these measures to tell the size. So, you know, we can bring in total costs. Which cities have the highest costs? And we can see that. But we're interested in the sales measure here. So we'll bring in our total sales. And now we see our bubbles get resized based on the stores with the most sales. And now we're getting some insights, right? So we can zoom in and we can see, oh, it looks like Guadalajara has one of the highest sales. There's also another one here. I think it's Ciudad de Mexico. So this is the one that we fixed actually. So if we hadn't fixed it, that would not be on the map. So this is great. Now the next thing that I want to do with this map is the color coding. So I want this to be color coded. So I'll go into our formatting option and I will look at data colors. So I could keep it just a straight color, you know, maybe I just want it to be orange, no problem. But what I really want to do, I want this to tell a specific story. And I can do that with the functions option here, which is basically a conditional formatting. So I'll click on that function option. And there's a few options that you can choose here. You can choose a color scale. So that would make the highest the darkest color and the lowest the lightest color. But what I want here is rules. So you can actually set rules. And my rule that I want is based on profitability. So I'll expand our gross profit margin. And from our visual here, we see that on average, for all of our stores, we have a gross profit margin of 28%. So I want to know which cities are above and which cities are below average. So create two rules here. So the first one is that if it's greater than or equal to 0.28 and below, I don't know, like 10, so it was a very profitable store. So if it's above, we want it to be blue. And if it's between 0 and 0.28, so if it's below our average, then I want it to be red. So which stores are above average, which stores are below average. And that's as simple as that. I can just hit OK. And now I can see that, you know, there's some stores here that are less profitable and some stores that are more profitable. So that's everything that I want to do with this map. Of course, there's a lot of other options that you can do to make it really look the way that you want it to. But for now, that's the visual that we want. The next thing we'll do is we'll create a line chart. And Power BI is going to try to resize it here, but I'll just do that myself because I know that I want to have another visual underneath it. And I want to expand right there. Perfect. So in this one, we're going to do a little time series of our sales. So for our values, we want to look at our sales, our total sales, as well as our profitability, so our gross profit margin. And because our gross profit margin is a percentage and our sales is a currency, if we put it under values, that would create a very weird visual. So we'll throw it into a secondary value, which means that now our profitability is on the right axis versus our total sales on the left axis. And finally, for our x-axis, we will throw in our date. And Power BI, when you have some date values, it automatically creates a hierarchy for you of year, quarter, month, day. And you can use that for your advantage to drill down into data and whatnot. And you can actually delete the levels of that hierarchy that you don't want. So I don't want to see quarters and I don't want to see days. I just want to see year and month. And now I see year and year. Where's the month? Well, the month would be available to drill down. So if I wanted to drill down only into 2018, then I can do that by clicking it. If I go back up, there it is, the 2 years. But what I actually want is I want year, month, and then year, month to really see that, that visual. So what I can do actually is to expand everything down to the lowest hierarchy. And now I see January 27 all the way to, I think, September 2018. And to match the formatting with our other visual, we'll drop a shadow on this one also to give that 3D effect. So that's looking pretty good. Now we can see some insights right away, and we can see the trends in our sales and the trends in our profitability. And the final visual that we're going to create is going to be a column chart. But before we do that, we're going to go to our products table. And we see here that we have a product category and a product name. We're going to select our product category. And just like Power BI automatically created a hierarchy for our date, we're going to create a hierarchy for our product. So we want product category to be at the highest and product name to be at the lowest of the hierarchy. So we can right click this variable and choose create a hierarchy. So now we created a product category hierarchy here. Right now it's only got the product category. So we'll right click on product name and say add to hierarchy. And if we had multiple hierarchy, it would give you the option here which one you want to add. But because we only have the one, we'll choose that one. And now we can see that our product category hierarchy has the category and the product name, which is what we want. So we'll go ahead and add that clustered column chart. Power BI is getting a little bit smarter at how I want to format this, but not quite. I just want to add a little bit of space here. And okay, for our axes, our x-axis, we actually want to bring in our hierarchy that we just created. So we'll bring that over. And the reason why I'm doing a hierarchy instead of just adding product name or product category is because I want this to be able, this visual to be able to drill down into the product categories, right down to the product name to know which products are breadwinners and which ones do we need to reconsider. So next we'll bring in our profitability here into our values. So we want to look at our product category and our products and see which ones are the highest, the most profitable products. So we see here now our category, right? We see electronics seems to have the highest profitability, and toys seems to have the lowest profitability. If I toggle on the drill down, I can now go into toys. Let's see, what's wrong with toys? Why are they so unprofitable? So if I click that now, I can see, for example, that dino eggs are got a very low profit margin. And we can see that plush ponies are apparently pretty profitable, which I have a daughter, so I can understand how that could work. So anyways, another thing that we can see now is because we drill down into toys, all of our visuals now are filtered to only look at the toys product category. So we can see the toys profitability. We can see our visuals here. So our sales on the map for toys only, and we can see the trends for toys. If I clicked on Dino Egg, we can even get more specific now in terms of filtering this data. So I'll just go back up and I'll untoggle this for now. So that was just a demo of how we can add the hierarchy so that we can drill down and really get those insights out of our visual here. And I'll add again a shadow to this one just to match all of the other ones for design purposes. So that is almost ready. The last thing I want to do is to add a slicer, and that's this visual here. And what a slicer is, and I'll just remove it over here. What a slicer is basically it's a filter. That's the easiest way to comprehend a slicer, is different ways to slice your data. And what I will do here with this slicer is I'm going to slice this by our date. So I'll bring in our date, and Power BI is going to create this nice little timeline for us, and we're ready to go. You could also have this be a drop down. So if you want to actually select every single one of your dates, which is not recommended for this type of data, or a list. So you can select each of your dates from here. So this would be a good option if you wanted to add, for example, product name in here. So I can add product name, and now I can filter all of my visuals by animal figures, for example. But what we're interested here is to add a date filter, and we'll change that back to between so that we had this draggable timeline. So now I can say, okay, maybe I only want 2017 data. So I can do that, and now all of my visuals get filtered to only show me data from 2017. And I can actually choose that in here as well. So if I wanted to only see data from July 2017 to July 2018, let's say that this is our year end. Our year end is July 2017 to July 2018. So we can do that, and now we're looking at our year end instead of our calendar year. And the final thing I'll do with this slicer here is I'll drop a shadow on it too, just to match all of the other visuals and give it that 3D effect. And again, there's lots that you can do with this, but this is just a brief demo. So we're ready to go ahead and publish this. This is an amazing visual. I think our sales team are going to be very impressed with the insights that we've pulled from the sales data. So we'll go ahead and we can actually just click publish, which is under the home tab. And once we hit that, Power BI is going to prompt us to save our work. We haven't saved this whole time, which I don't advise you do. I advise you to save your work often. So we'll save it to call it Maven report. Yeah, we'll keep it in here. So now we've saved it. Now Power BI is going to open up our workspaces in the Power BI service. And this is basically your different teams that you have in the Power BI cloud. And you can when you first start, you probably only have a My Workspace, which is your own individual workspace. But I've already created a Maven Toys workspace here, and workspaces are very useful for sharing our data with our colleagues. So I'll go ahead and select Maven Toys, and Power BI is going to publish this now into the Power BI service. So now it's done, success. We can actually go directly to that report. So if we click this link, it'll open up our web browser, and now we can see our report in the Power BI service. And so now our report is in the cloud. It's ready to be shared with people within our organization, or we can publish this online. So how do we do that? So first option is to share from here. So there's a little share button. And when you click that, you can copy the link that you can send it in an email or open Outlook directly from here, or share it in Teams. So Power BI has a really good integration within Teams that they're pushing forward, and it's really nice in terms of if you're working with the team on these different reports and dashboards, you can actually integrate it right into Teams and comment and really get that collaboration piece going. But a simple way is just to copy the link and paste it in an email and send it off to somebody. They will need a Power BI license in order to be able to see this. So if you have a license and your coworker does not, they won't be able to see this. So both parties will need to have a license. And so that's to share internally. To share externally on the web, you can do that by going to File and Embed Report. And there's a couple options here. There's embedding into SharePoint, embedding into website or portal, or publishing to the web. The difference between embedding to a website or portal versus publishing to the web is that a website or portal will still need the users that access your report to have a Power BI license. Whereas if you publish it to the web, anybody that comes to the link is able to see this report. So the same way that I shared the link with you beforehand. So once we click that, we can create an embed code. Power BI is just going to give you some formalities here about the fact that if you publish to the web, this data is now public and anybody with an internet access can see it. So if you would not do this with sensitive data. This is only data that you want to share with the world. Again, Power BI is going to give you another warning before you go ahead and publish, but we'll go ahead and publish. And Power BI now gives us a couple links. One link here is to copy and send over to whoever we want to view our dashboard. Or this code here, you can copy over this code and embed this in a website. So the same way that Focal embedded their report into their own website, this is the code that you use for that. And it's very simple. You just go into the back end of your website, plug in this code, and you've got your report. So that's it. So now that you've gone through this webinar, you should be familiar with how to connect to your data, prepare for analysis, create some measures and some interactive visualizations, publish that to the Power BI service, and share it with your colleagues or online. So yeah, you're ready to go now.